Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to all the listeners of the Our Girlington podcast. Again, we are live with a special guest and a really touching subject this time. So, before we start, let me introduce the panel. So, we have our ever resident Maulana Sajid, Imam of Masjid Umar and head of the Paradise Academy, also organizer and volunteer at Our Girlington. MashaAllah. So the amount of effort that goes into some of these podcasts sometimes isn't shown, and Molna Saab does a lot of the work in the background to go get it, organize everything, sort the times out, and there's a lot of hard work. So mashallah, we're blessed to have Molna Saab on our side and helping our community. We also have Imran Hafeez, who is the manager of the Bradford Hub for the National Literacy Trust. And inshallah, we're going to speak a bit more about that. And I'm going to let Imran talk and introduce that. So Imran's been in the community a long time. He lives in the local area, and even we've kind of grown up, and I've seen Imran about, and we've got on really well, alhamdulillah. But when I really got introduced to his work and what he was doing was at the fundraiser for Masjid Umar. So Girlington Muslim Welfare Association held an open day and a fundraiser for the new masjid where people could come in and go see it. And Imran turned up to that. And he had a stall there with loads of books, and it was really a colourful stall. I found the really interesting thing when I sat down, when I went over to the stall and I had talked to him, and I got a couple of books for my youngsters, for my kids. So it was really interesting the work he's doing. So inshallah, I'm gonna hand over to Imran so he can explain a bit of his background and tell us what the National Literacy Trust is. Imran, over to you.
Thank you, Baba. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And just a thank you first to you guys for hosting us. I've been listening, as I said to you guys earlier, to the Our Girlington podcast for the last couple of weeks. I think it's a great job that you're doing to keep everybody connected during this time. So, well done for that. We're here to talk about the topic of literacy. And so if I tell you a little bit about the National Literacy Trust, I've now been working with the charity for just over 6 years. They set up, they've been running now for just nearly over 25 years now, and they've always been sort of London-based central charity. That's where the head office is. I think a few years ago, so their main mission, and it's something that I learned since I came into this job, is around the literacy rates in the UK. You might think that low literacy and illiteracy, certainly I did, is it's a third world problem. But when you look at it relatively, I was surprised that we have, for example, 1 in 6 adults in the UK that have got very poor literacy skills. If you're living in an area of disadvantaged or poverty, as they say, inner city neighborhoods, quite a lot of areas that we have in Bradford, then that the chances of that just double. So the statistics in terms of like what that then does is in terms of you're not able to support your children, you're not able to support yourself into the job market, and it creates a lot of sort of knock-on effects just in terms of the sort of whole social problem that low literacy creates across the UK. So at the time, the motivation by the National Literacy Trust was that often we see this literacy, and we'll talk about what we mean by that in a second, as something that is an issue for the schools. It's something that happens at the school. But the idea behind setting up these hubs, and Bradford, mashallah, we were one of the first ones that came online, as I say, 6 years back, was this recognition that schools are at the center of this, and they're doing so much, but we have to see this as an issue for everybody within that community context. So whether you're a business, whether you're a madrasa that's seeing children through extended provision and madrasa classes, supplementary classes, whether you're a parent, whether you're a local shop, this is going to affect you ultimately. If you're a business, where's tomorrow's workforce going to come from if they are illiterate, if they have low literacy? And so there's a lot of knock-on effects of low literacy. It's felt hardest in the areas where we have, as I say, disadvantage and poverty. And therefore, the idea about hubs is to use the national organization, who is a sort of wealth of expertise, national sort of research, statistics, resources. The books you mentioned, Barbara, for example, are brokered through partnerships that these guys and we have at a national level with publishers who want to get on board this mission of getting books into the hands of children and families who might not have them. The Bradford Hub, and indeed all the hubs that we have now, I think there's like something like, I lost count, 10 or 12 across the country, is a medium through which we can sort of, broker some of that skill, some of that resource, some of that training, the whole offer around sort of improving literacy in areas of disadvantage through that partnership. And I as I say, sort of 6 years ago came on board. I was at I spent a number of years working at the time. I was still working at St Edmund's Nursery School, which is still on Washington Street. I used to be part of the Family and Community Services team. So before that, at the Manning Girlington Youth Partnership. So I'm sort of very grounded in the area. So where I suppose the slight bias on my part is where I can sort of utilize and the partnerships and the connections that I've got with Mulan Saab and the local schools, the community centre, the children's centre go way back. So I always welcome that, and this is sort of one that I said, yeah, definitely. We did it at the fundraising day, as you said. We were able to gift some books out, and hopefully, inshallah, we're going to be doing some more of that. So just a quick sort of whistle stop tour there, just in terms of
Mashallah.
the National Literacy Trust and their commitment to, and our commitment to Bradford.
So, Mama, I want to ask you. So, literacy has a huge imprint in Islam, and Islam is really big on being literate. So, what are some of the things or some of the points from an Islamic point of view about education and being educated?
Sure.
First of all, Jazakallah, and Assalamu alaikum to Brother Imran. Nice to have you on podcast, and Jazakallah for accepting our invite. Literacy, the first revelation upon Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, during the time of when he would go to Ghar Hira and the cave of Hira, and he would meditate, and the first words that were revealed, Iqra, read. So the first instructions were to read, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was illiterate, he was an unlettered prophet, and he replied, Ma ana biqari'in, I don't know how to read. And again the instruction was Iqra, read. And again Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam replied, Ma ana biqari'in, I don't know how to read. And the third time, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read the name of your Lord, the one that created you. So the first instructions in Islam are to read, and a person who reads and writes is a literate person, an educated person. And education, knowledge is power. And our whole, unfortunately today people have negative connotation towards Islam. But Islam and knowledge and seeking education, a person that goes out to seek knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the path to Jannat easy for him. Do you understand? And there's so many virtues of seeking knowledge. Muslim, to seek knowledge is farz upon every Muslim. So this is Islamic knowledge, knowledge of sciences, knowledge that we need to benefit ourselves with. So knowledge is huge, and literacy is huge. And in one narration of hadith, the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was a pen upon which everybody's taqdeer was written with. So the thing was, you need a pen to write. And when you have a pen to write, so there are three pens, the scholars say. One, Allah has a pen, upon which the taqdeer of everybody is written. Second is the angels write our deeds with pens. And the third pens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted his people, we utilize pen for knowledge. So anything to do with knowledge, we need to value, we need to have adab, we need to have respect. So pen, writing, reading, all come together. So you can only write if you can read. And one of the speciality when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he's a ummi, he was an unlettered prophet, was that in the time in Makkah and in Arabia, people were illiterate. They didn't know how to read and write. And from people around Arabia, they were literate people, but in Arabia itself, people were illiterate, majority of the people. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was illiterate. And the thing was, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed knowledge and the best of knowledge upon Nabi Karim Sallallahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave comprehension in his speech. He was Jawami al-Kalim, that he would say a few words, but those few words speak volumes. You understand? Even two words on Nabi Sallallahu, now you get books and books upon just those, the explanation of those two words. Do you understand? So these were, so when Nabi Sallallahu, he had the best of characters, he was bestowed with this knowledge. And when he would recite Quran, people would say, where did you get this? You know, people would say this is poetry. And this was Quran that was recited upon Nabi Karim Sallallahu. And the thing was, when Nabi Sallallahu would recite Quran, if you see Quran, Quran is linguistics. When a person, when a child comes to madrasa and he learns alif ba 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 ta ba, you know, in English you do phonics. Nowadays, I remember we used to learn A B C D E, but nowadays the kid learns aba ka da, and when they spell they ka ta, and we used to spell CAT, but now it's all on sounds, based on sounds, and Quran is based on sounds. So the thing is, Alhamdulillah, Islam from, Allah Ta'ala, when He created Adam alayhi Islam, the first thing Allah Ta'ala, He taught Adam some the names of all the components and all the things. So he bestowed knowledge upon Adam alayhi Islam. So as a Muslim, knowledge, seeking knowledge, reading, writing is a big, part of our deen. When people say that, oh, these people don't educate their women and they don't learn and this, that, no, that's wrong. Islam, it teaches education. If you have education, then you're going to be a good Muslim. You're going to be a strong Muslim. You will know what's right. You will know what's wrong. You will know what you got to do, what you're not got to do. So obviously, there's always going to be knowledge that's going to be helpful, and there's going to be knowledge that's not going to be helpful. So you take out the good and you leave the bad. And the thing is here, literacy. And sometimes people knock our children, but alhamdulillah, as our Muslim or from the Pakistani background, our children, they speak English, they know their mother tongue, so it might be Punjabi or Inco, whatever, Pashto, or whatever they speak, or Urdu as well. And then they go to mosque and they learn Arabic. So, 3, 4 languages, and we still get knocked for, these guys can't speak. Yes, we need to realize the importance, especially English is a universal language that gets spoken around the world. And it's very important that our children, they know how to read, they know how to write, so they can better themselves when they're at school. They can achieve good grades, and then obviously going further on in their careers, they can achieve a good career. So it's very, very important reading and writing. When I go into schools, go into primary school, I emphasize, and when we talk about knowledge, sometimes I think the problem that we've disconnected dini knowledge and the secular knowledge. No, secular knowledge accompanies with our dini knowledge. You understand, learning your maths, your science, your English. Again, like Imran was saying, if you know how to read and write, you're going to be able to read your maths books, your science books, your history books. If you don't know how to read and write, you're going to struggle in every other language. So literacy is the foundation of excelling in your knowledge. So it's an Islam emphasis. Like I said, the first word, iqra, read. The instructions are to read. Knowledge is vast, and this is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala blesses people with knowledge. So the thing is, we need to make sure that sometimes, like I said, we divide the two things, that we think, oh no, we need to emphasize on Quran and forget everything else. No, yes, when it's Quran time, we need to recite our Quran, but when it's time to get our books, we need to open up our vocabulary. We need to learn more words, so become more articulate in our speech and everything. So we need to emphasize literacy and the importance of literacy within our community.
So, mashallah, Maulana Sahib, some really important points there. Imran, we talked about literacy and we talked about reading, writing. So, what does literacy encapsulate? Is it just reading and writing, or is it more?
That's a really good question, that, Bob. I'm glad you asked me that. I was just having the thought as well as Moran Sahib was sharing those reflections there, mashallah. And it encapsulates everything. So, the misconception often is when somebody says literacy, it sounds quite sort of like a schooly type word. It must mean sort of reading or reading a particular kind of book. And actually, what we've sort of found, or what I found in my experience, and how we talk about it at the National Literacy Trust, it's the ability to sort of do all those things. So, read, write, speak, and listen. But it's to do that in order to make sense of the world and be able to communicate effectively. So this is also inclusive of things like, critical and creative literacy skills that we need for the digital age that we're in now. We can't underestimate the importance of being able to navigate through use a computer, for example. Okay, and one of the examples that have come up in this current situation that we find ourselves in, where schools are closed and children are having to do a lot of learning at home, is we've reverted to sort of online methods of lessons and teaching and homework and all those sorts of things. But what happens if you don't have that at home? A, you're disadvantaged because you don't have a device that you can use, but also B, if you can't sort of navigate and go through that. So digital creative literacy skills, it's all those things that enable us to reach our potential as individuals, also sort of take part and participate in our communities, in wider society. And I think underneath that, what underpins, when you've got all those things, then there's a level of sort of confidence that comes with that, and it is that sort of self-belief and confidence that helps you to, when you're an adult, support your child, do all those things. But and we can talk about it now, mashallah, the foundations of that are some very simple things. Today, obviously, we're talking about literacy in the community. So what can we do, as a community? What are those simple things from the early years all the way up to there that incorporate that? At the heart of it, yes, it's always going to be about reading, but yeah, it captures lots of things in the modern age as well that we need to know, that help us to take part in the world and in society as a whole.
So
I don't know if that makes it any clearer or more complicated, but it's
kind
a lot.
of
It's everything.
It opened up my eyes to it being a lot more than just reading and writing. It's the ability to comprehend as well. But one thing you did mention there is the digital age, and it's something that I'm personally, so from my profession, the digital age and computers and laptops and iPads and phones is what my profession is all about. So in a world of in the digital age, where all a kid really wants to do is sit in front of an iPad and play games and consume digital knowledge, why and I'm guessing this is I'm assuming this is your position, and correct me if I'm wrong, why is picking up a book so important?
It is my position, Babar. Yeah, printed, sort of this whole sort of conversation around digital versus print, and ultimately I think the reason why a book, a printed book, and I've got some here that I'm going to share with you guys today, but I'm just going to pick up like the first one that I can find over here. So book that has pages. The reason why that, particularly for children, is really important, is because it allows you to use your mind and your imagination to be able to connect with yourself in that way. For the early years, we'll have picture books, but the stimulation in that is, it's either the words, it's either the voice of the person that's telling the story, which might be a parent or a teacher, it might be the person who's reading themselves, and it's the images, and I think through that you can that is at the heart of the connection that you have to develop a love of reading, because you can almost sort of take yourself away. You can imagine the things that you're reading about. You can picture them. You can process them. It's there's a different sort of connection happening in terms of how we're processing that neurologically, and what it's doing for our well-being. So it will always be important, and we will always advocate that. And I think what we've seen in the last decade or even longer is how quickly sort of technology has adapted, has become sort of at the forefront of our lives. So our kids are now growing up in a world which is very different to what we were. And people will often say, parents will say, at a very young age, the kids will know how to sort of, they're swiping up and down the screens, they know how to navigate through that, and it's almost like an instant stimulus, and it's a screen stimulus, and you'll read a lot. There's a lot of pros and cons in terms of how that happens and what it's doing for our brains and for children's brains. But I think ultimately we have to start in a position where we have to try and almost accept that this is a part of the changing world. And I referred right at the beginning to the Literacy Trust having this sort of access and connection to lots of research. So we will survey thousands of pupils across the country. We survey parents as well. On the back of that, we're able to sort of gauge what some of those trends are. So technology, just in terms of like, you can have storytelling, ebooks, and apps. So at an early year communication stage, it can help you. It can play an important role. As long as I think the sort of what we've always sort of found, and the research points towards that, is as long as there is a supportive adult that's facilitating some of that interaction. So, you're with them, you're seeing what you're doing, you're developing, you're looking at this app together, you're telling this story together, you're doing that collectively. I think where it becomes a problem is where, a child sat in a corner and they get nothing else but that, because it's going to keep them quiet. But
Imran, I've got a question. Through your research, do you think people are reading less books now because of the digital stuff that we have and everything?
Yeah, I think I think in short, I would say there isn't a definitive sort of way to gauge if we're reading more, but I think the indication would be that certainly children are saying that they are more likely to read on screens than on paper, outside of schools. So they say that, we do read, but we'll read on a website or we'll read on a. So I think just the one stat that I had over here was 68.7% of the children that were surveyed from 2012, they said that they read on a computer, phone, or tablet, compared to 60% who said they read in a book or a magazine or newspaper. So I think in short, that would say, yeah, definitely it is.
And
that is a part of it.
I think we want to promote that read from the books.
Yeah.
No, it's a similar example. Like, I see in the mosque, and nowadays, like, people like Baba, who are always technology, always promoting technology. They'll come in the mosque, and again, I'm not knocking no person. What happens is a lot of people have Qurans on their phones. So, before that whole habit of going and picking up the Quran, kissing it, opening up the Quran, turning the pages and reciting. Some people now, because they've got in their phones, and so I always encourage them, Namaz, I say, Masha, you come 10, 15 minutes before. The phone is convenience. If you're out and about and you want to read Quran, if you're on a bus or something, yeah, alhamdulillah. But if you're in the masjid and you got 10, 15 minutes, it's better to pick up that Quran, picking up a Quran, a book itself, to kissing it, to opening up the book, to turning up the pages. That's the essence of knowledge. Do you understand? And I think it's similar with books as well. To pick up a book and to read a book, I think that's what children should know and value. Otherwise, like you said, with digital world, it's there, but it's and I think another thing is, I was going to say, with the digital, I don't know, sometimes kids pick up the bad behavior where they skip the words or it's slang and whatever else, and I don't know.
I think your approach to it, Mossab, is absolutely right. I think we can't change the fact that technology plays this vital role and central role. So, but what we found is that that can be the route into reading. For people that otherwise wouldn't. Traditionally, what we might say are reluctant readers. Sometimes, boys are classed as reluctant readers. So, in all of the technology can be a way to get them to reading books. As a sort of first step. So I think that it's there, and we've got to engage with it, and through it we can encourage, certainly at an early years age. So one simple example is this: that often you might find like YouTube. Obviously, children like to watch YouTube and things. I've just got an example of a book. I'll just show you over here, and it's a Netflix series. At the end of the podcast, we're going to talk about a book gifting session that we're going to do. So this is one of the books that are available. So this series is on Netflix. It's Our Planet. Obviously David Attenborough presents the series. It's a non-fiction book. There's lots of amazing sort of photographs in this book like that. So one of the ways that you can connect with your children through digital literacy, mashallah, I mean, look at that, is by sort of having, particularly non-fiction books can connect to materials that are online. So you might watch the video together, but then this can come into play because they've seen the stuff online, and you watch the series, and then suddenly it's represented in a book, and there's lots of ways that you can do that. So I would say, yes, look for ways to connect things that are digital to books, and then you can support kids to make some of that transition.
And the closures of libraries, has that played a part? Uh, Especially, you used to have a lot of mobile libraries. You used to have a lot of local libraries where you would go with your child, whatever. Or I remember we used to go with our dad, and we'll
Yeah,
sit there and he'll read the newspaper, and we'll just go, whether
yeah,
we read
yeah, yeah.
a little bit some. And
Massively, Molana Sab, I would say that is a pattern across the country, just in terms of like whenever austerity hits, and councils and people are looking to make cuts, it's the library services that seem like the thing that are often dispensable, and it's okay, we can make cutbacks there. So those have not been championed in the same way. And you reflect on your own experience. What that does is it creates a culture within that area that it's normal. Your father sat there, he's reading a newspaper, you can look at some books. You can't underestimate the importance of what that modeled behavior is going to do, because it means, it's okay for me to read, it's okay for me to go to the library. And if it's not there, and a child doesn't get to make that connection, then that's really, really detrimental. Often lots of children in Bradford, lots of children across the UK don't have a single book at home, and libraries are the only sort of way that you can borrow books for free. The whole sort of culture of, and the environment within the space, and what it promotes, an environment for learning, for sharing, and for books. I think it's had a massive impact. And just last year there were consultations in Bradford as well around some of the local libraries that were at risk. And what I would urge, if where we still have our local libraries, we used to have a mini one in Girlington, but certainly Manningham isn't too far away. Is wherever there's an opportunity to support that, we need to sort of get behind it. Otherwise, those kinds of resources are at risk of being lost in the near future, if not sooner.
So just on that point on Molna said there about learning and books. So what I tend to find is, and I'm not a big fiction reader. My stuff is mainly the stuff that I read is mainly non-fiction. Is a lot of the times when I'm looking for stuff online, so I know what I'm looking for and I kind of get the details of it. But a lot of the stuff which I read, especially around the technology stuff, is the way books are structured. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know that I need in the book, and then I come across it. Whereas if I was going to search for it, I have to know about some element of it first, and then I'll go search, and I'll go, okay, I know a little bit about this topic, and I need to know more about it. But stuff in books, I have no aspect, and I come across it, and you're like, oh, okay, I had no idea that thing existed. So that's my take on it. So even though I'm a software developer and my whole world is pretty much online, there's still a big backing in that book domain where you have to sometimes you have to go off and get that information. Well, one thing I want to ask you, Imran, is so what's the role of the guardians or the parents in this sort of mix here? Because from a parent, I can say, well, education is the school's problem, and when we come to the Quran stuff, that's the masjid are dealing with that, and the school are dealing with the other side of it, with the conventional sort of English and that stuff. So it's covered, right? Why do I need to worry about it?
It's often a reflection that, Babar, that you pick up from parents. And I think behind that is some a level of fear and sometimes insecurity, in terms of, like, if you really sort of pin it down, there's an inability to engage with the schools, and vice versa. So the schools to engage with the parents. So many things that you can say on that, and let's talk about parents. So I think it ultimately, just in terms of the home being the child's sort of first teacher, the parents being the child's first teacher, how they learn about the world, and the amount of time that the child spends with parents, particularly in the early years. So there was a lot last year. There was this whole sort of paper that came out around word deficit in some children. By the time that our youngest kids start nursery at year 5, they're already sort of 18, 19 months behind some of their peers that are coming from more affluent backgrounds. And, you know, that gap is never made up. So the kids that are then go on, and what they've bought into that early years is what they've had at home. You know, the difference is that it isn't necessarily that in those areas the schools are better, but there's more of an assertion by the parents to have conversations with the children when they're early. They'll often be reading with them regularly. They'll pay simple things like when children get older, just to connect, ask questions about how their day's been, and those sorts of things are all really, really significant. So, you know, yes, there's a big role that schools will play, and will, you know, throughout that. But in order to support that and make sure that our children are getting the most out of the education system, what happens at home is just as, and I think the research would say even more important than what happens at school. So, you know, I'm talking about sort of the physical space in the home, the interactions that you might have with your parents or family members that support the children's learning. So they might just be conversations, you know, talking about toys or food or what's happening, things that accelerate their words and their vocabulary. Again, you know, this is sounding like it's sort of, you know, very schooly words that I'm saying, but this isn't even about English in that context. This is about, you know, the whatever language, and if it's the mother tongue language, then these things often don't even happen even in the mother tongue. You know, that expansive vocabulary. Because if a child is going into nursery at 5, for example, and has had all of those things, even if it's in another language, whatever language that is, the basic sort of cognitive connections and development of the brain in terms of how languages work has already happened. So English, it happens very quickly. So this isn't even about that. Simple things like sort of playing with your children and having that conversation when you're playing, and obviously, you know, reading, you know, books from an early age.
Even I
Um,
think communication is you just mentioned, like sometimes it's not reading and writing. Sometimes it's just sitting down with family and just talking. And when you're
yeah.
talking, you broaden your words. And what happens
Yes.
is, I think that's another danger in our society now, with all, sometimes with digital or sometimes with the ills in society, that we as a family don't sit down, or we don't communicate, or when we do sit down, nobody's talking to each other.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're talking to others around the world, but you know, we're not having those conversations between ourselves, just about what's happening in the day, or what you've been up to, or just simple conversations. And I think, you know, those conversations are you know, not taking place. Or sometimes, you know, when I hear stories of, you know, that my children don't even communicate with me, or vice versa. And it's, I think we need to emphasize to the viewers and the parents that, look, take out your time with your children, put your iPads, everything away, and just talk. And
Well,
whether
Sab, I
talking
think
your
what I
own
would,
language,
yeah.
sorry.
What I was going to add to that is that, you know, that reflection that parents make, that my kids don't talk to me, often it feels like at that stage is too late. Perhaps it's a phase that the kids go through when they're a little bit older, but certainly that's a reference to kids that are older. So we can't underestimate those early years, right from the moment when the child's born. And, you know, you may even sort of have heard about campaigns around even before the child's born, when the child's in the mother's womb, it's picking up sounds and things. So the development around sort of language and social interaction and everything else, everything points to it happening a lot earlier than we might, you know, believe. So you do read up on some of the health research about sort of, you know, that. Like what you've got happening there is that right from the early on, if we set those routines and examples, if we're able to invest that time at the earliest years, I think that's where it's going to pay the biggest dividend, rather than, you know, thinking and this isn't sort of like it's easy to do, you know, but when the kids are, when the children are the youngest, when they're the babies, all that thing around looking at your facial expressions, the babbling, the talking to them, the spending the time with them, that I think that's the foundations which then go on to, you know, have that regular conversation about how your day was. If that doesn't work, find the medium. Maybe it's something that they're interested in. My boy, mashallah, I've got 3 children. 10-year-old, my boy is the eldest, and I've got 2 daughters of 4 and 5 and 3. I was just thinking there of my sort of 5-year-old. She won't go to bed until she has a conversation with me about her school day, what her friends have been doing, what her teachers have been doing. That's her thing. That's what she wants to do. And if I show her that I'm paying attention, I'm interested, and I ask her some questions, then I think that's our time of having that discussion. I hope I'm laying the seeds to sort of keep that connection with them when they get older.
That you just mentioned, and it's quite interesting, is that the effects even before the child is born. There's many stories and wakis of pious predecessors where when they would recite Quran, and they would recite so much that the child, when he was born, he knew a portion of the Quran because of the effects of the recitation.
I don't doubt
And
that. Yeah.
and the thing is, like you said, I think, like you said, its environment is very important. Environment of reading, environment of just talking and communicating, and that's our Islamic atmosphere that a child should be born around and raised up upon. And these are fundamentals that, once these, like you said, once they know these adab, these akhlaq, these etiquettes, what will happen is, whether it's English, whether it's Quran, whether it's anything that they do in their life, they will know how to master it because they've been given the foundations to. And on that point that you were mentioning, I was working in a high school several years ago, and we had this concern about literacy, and especially amongst the Asian community, not reading books. And what we did was we bought, Roald Dahl books and all these books, so that, because it was an Islamic school, to make sure that their vocabulary expands and they learn. And I know one famous scholar now, mashallah, he speaks in English, and his English is very high. And in the Alum, sometimes the English class won't all that, but how he mastered it was he used to read novels and
Yeah.
books. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
when he talks, even we can't understand some of the words that he uses. But what I'm trying to say to you is that's how he did it. And what I was saying, when I was in high school, and what we did was, every day we had only 5 minutes slot where I used to call a child from a different class, and we'll just have a reading time. So they would just read from anywhere, a passage. So just so that they're reading. And then we introduced that when they would have their registration, they would have to pick up any of their books that they've chosen from the library, school library, and they would have 10-15 minutes of reading time. You understand? So I think if you allocate a time at home, and that's why even Islamically, there's always the thing of ta'aleem, to do ta'aleem at home, to read a book at home. So, like you said, whether Islamic ethical books, maybe a series of the Prophet, but as well as that, also, like you said, your novels, your Roald Dahls, and everything, so that you expand on your English, you expand on and read these books. It's very, very important.
Moisab, just simple things like we know that the influence modeling that behavior can have. So, your physical home learning environment, if there are books and newspapers and magazines that are just part of the everyday norm, that plays a big role. Physically, if you've got, books that children can see, is massive. And I think the biggest one, do not underestimate the effect of your children seeing. Obviously, we, in terms from a parenting perspective, then we are our sort of children's biggest role models. If we say something to them through our words and we don't follow it up with our actions, it's never going to be. They won't take heed of that because it doesn't mean anything, because we're not fulfilling that ourselves. So reading, very much sort of goes along that. If you model reading yourself, then it has a massive impact. I remember a couple of years ago we ran a program. One of the things that we work on in Bradford is a program called Literacy Champions, and that's anybody can effectively be a literacy champion. And what they're doing is they are encouraging other people, either in their peer groups or their friends or the children, to get involved in literacy and read. One of the ways through which they did that was reading groups and book groups. And I remember this group of mums. There was one lady who was a bit of a bookworm, and she encouraged a group of her friends who were never really into reading before to, let's read this book and we'll get together every now and then, we'll talk about it. Imran, pay for our coffees at Morrison's, and we'll have a little get together. So she encouraged them, she motivated them. The book was it was Khalid Hosseini's A Thousand Splendid Suns, and is a Afghani writer, and he references sort of everything that's happened in Afghanistan over the last 20 years as little snippets within the story. So as a text, it really connected with them. There were references within the book that they thought, oh yeah, I know somebody like that, or I could relate to this particular character. And they described the effect of them reading at home and their kids seeing them reading at home. These were the other ladies that had not done it before, so it was something quite a surprise. So the kids were like, they were interested, Mum, what's that? What are you reading? And and they had the opportunity to tell them, it's a book. I'm reading it with my friends, and it's about this. And so, modeling reading ourselves, however that is, newspapers, magazines, books, having that within our environment, I think you can't underestimate how much of an effect that has on our children.
Imran, I think that system's also changed where like our parents would pick up the Daily Junk or the the Asian papers. I think even those they've become limited, or it's all digital now, or but like you said, I think the key point is the environment of books, environments of reading, to create that environment in the house. What would you do with? Sometimes you get this question that, oh well, my parents don't know English, and so we don't have that connection, or but I think that's just a lame excuse. You can communicate in your mother tongue.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, Musab. Are you talking about like the children sort of saying that they can't? Because parents will. They'll. If your English is limited, then no doubt there'll come a stage in the children's schooling. Maybe at nursery school, primary school, it's okay, and suddenly when you move through sort of phonics, and then homework starts coming home, and they've got particular questions. I would hope that there's other people within the family that can support that if there is a particular issue around that. But parents should.
How about parents say this? My child, I can't understand it.
Bilingualism, Molan Saab, is a massive asset. If you engage with your children in the language that you can speak in, then to whatever degree that is, right, that's your contribution. Whether or not you sort of go on to then learn further English or do ESOL and do those sorts of things is completely up to yourself. But I think from a very early age, in your own language, to speak that language with your children and to keep that connection with your children, because they very easily will pick up other languages as well. Just by showing an interest is something that sort of hit me when I sort of saw some of the stats around this. So I was reading a paper on white working class boys, so being some of the lowest attaining in the UK in particular. So you're looking at sort of estates where there's unemployment. The biggest factor that made the difference between some of the boys that were on that estate and perhaps some of the I would say children of migrants in some of the other areas was the fact that the father or the mother or somebody, whatever job they'd had, whether it was a taxi driver, whether it was in a restaurant, whatever it was, had this aspiration for their children. They're going to do better than I am. And as a result, they'd ask them, things like, they'd take an interest in their school. Even if it was a rollicking, they pressured them to do well at school, or in the good examples of that, it was a case of you must make use best of your opportunities. Unfortunately, in some of those estates, those boys didn't have the same role models who some of their parents were quite happy just sat being unemployed because they'd had a negative influence of they've not had a good experience at school. They never really got into any job role or anything like that, so it became this perpetual sort of cycle that moved from generation to generation where nobody was working. So there's nothing in their minds that's going to sort of make them this. And it was profound that just a simple thing like that connection from a parent that asks those questions, or actively shows that I'm interested in how you turn out, and I'm not going to let you turn out as a whatever. There's something in the psyche. It sets people off on a path. It makes a difference.
So Imran, there's really you mentioned it a couple of times now. You mentioned the economic state of the family. So you mentioned like affluent people, affluent families have higher literacy skills, and then just there you mentioned about people who are not so affluent, but they have that drive and that connection. What's the correlation between affluence and literacy? Literacy, like how
Yeah.
people are good with kind of them sort of skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's this. You may have heard of the term sort of social mobility, and the links to poverty. So how you sort of move from being very sort of disadvantaged to more advantaged and settled and educated and literate. And I've spoken about the gap that opens at the beginning. With children, number of children that are living in the poverty in the UK today, well, by 2022 is expected to reach sort of 5.5 million, I think. It sort of suddenly sort of tells us that we can't just sort of, it's not something that we can ignore. And those numbers, I mean, you've got everything from the 1 in 3 stat of children that live in the UK today. So 1 in 3 children sort of live in poverty, and so that sets them off for this sort of the line of their life often. What we've got is that those deficits, as I said, they continue. So that gap never reduces. And as I'm sort of trying to talk, I'm just trying to look to see sort of, I think a very real anecdotal example of that. So there's this thing about you're not able to sort of move out of your situation. You're not able to do any good for yourself because your literacy gap, you never sort of make it up. It starts you're 19 months behind when you're 5, and at current projections, it's probably going to take you 40 years to make that up. So you never make it up in your life. In the anecdotal example of that, I think the difference is, and this is where I've often sort of spoken to schools, and there's a role to play. Some of the really inspirational school leaders talk about this sort of this triangle between your parents, your children, and the school. And when you get that right, it's right for the children. Often in your more affluent areas, it's the pressure from the parents that stops the schools from falling over, or they will hold the school to account because the school knows that the parents will sort of write regularly, they'll keep a regular connection. It's the pressure that keeps those schools going. So often in affluent areas you see good schools, and I don't think that's a mistake. It's a sort of, they're a product of each other. It's this sort of assertiveness to make sure that your kids' school are doing right by your school, and when you do that as a collective, it has an effect on the school. Where you don't have that in areas of sort of disadvantage and poverty, I suppose, and where you've got sort of low literacy, you can almost sort of feel like it's easy for schools. I'm not by any means sort of saying that schools are guilty of this, but it's an easy trap to sort of fall into if nobody's asking you anything, if nobody's really bothered, if nobody's speaking to you, then you're more likely to sort of that standard is not going to be upheld. So there's something about accountability, upholding standards. I remember going into a conversation once about one of my children in a school, and for some reason I got delayed with work that morning, and as I've gone into the meeting, almost sort of felt like I was being treated like how they might speak to some of their children. And I just sort of like, I was a bit taken aback at first, and I had to say, excuse me, who do you think you are, and who do you think I am? And in the end, we sort of resolved this, and I had an apology and everything else, and it never got further than that. But I always remember when I walked out from that meeting, and the guy that I saw sat down in the reception area, who I knew his English isn't going to be great, and I just thought to myself, like, if she sort of goes at him like she had done at me, right, what's he going to say? He's not going to be able to say anything. And I think that's sometimes the difference. So, I suppose
But Imran, isn't that a sad situation that, and sometimes, when I hear these statistics, and especially like the affluent area and not so affluent area, because especially like us guys, where we've come from, well, our parents have come from back home, where we're probably born here, but sometimes like if you see in Pakistan, and even now, and the other day my children were showing me some YouTube clip, and this tourist going to Pakistan, and he was shocked at youngsters speaking very good English. and the level of grammar was a lot better than what you expect here in England. Do you understand? And sometimes, what my point is that um, is we're always measuring things. And sometimes that measurement, because we've got to make sure by this age they've got to get to here, and if they don't, they consider it a failure, and the whole collapse, and that's it. You're useless, and I think, I don't know. For me, it's too scary because child development, with different children could be at different rates, but also, like you said, they can be affects. There can be environment effects upon the child. But the thing is, like you said, the mosque have to get teaching Quran right for the children. The schools have to get, getting there. Sometimes, like you said, these arguments sometimes, but how about with schools? Well, it is your job to teach, the children. You understand? If the parents are your job, then they would, yeah, the parents do try. There's a lot of parents that sacrifice a lot. They do try as well, everything. But it's I don't know. It's always, when people come up with, well, this is a deprived background. Well, we know our deprived background. Yeah, people have got Lamborghinis parked outside, back to back terrace houses. So sometimes we know how deprived we are. So our parents
You
have
have to
come.
take it within a context. I know exactly what
Yeah,
you're referring to.
and especially our parents, like you said, they had ambition. They sacrificed themselves and whatever. And when they set those high standards for their children, you might think that they're unpar. Like the other day, I was talking to an elder, and he was saying, "Look, Melissa, we probably didn't get the education, but we were given uh, we knew our responsibilities." And he said, "My child is educated, but he doesn't know his responsibilities." And he made a very good point. And he goes, "Look, what I've achieved, I bet my child will never achieve in his life." And he was right to an extent what his point was. So the thing is, with literature, with all this reading and writing, I don't know. Sometimes there's a conflict. Is it to just to get that degree? Is it just to get that result, or is it a wider thing that to communication, your skill as a life?
Yeah, no, I think it needs to be holistic. It's about sort of being sort of actively engaging in society and being happy. So well-being, being happy with yourself, and all of the links to that are grounded as amazing as it is within those early things where we're able to develop a love and connection to literature, to read, to want to sort of find and seek knowledge through books, to enjoy reading just for the sake of enjoying it, not even for any sort of means gain. You're right. Often in the back of this, you get sort of lost in all this language and statistics and numbers, but behind all of that is very much about sort of fulfilling who you are and being happy and being well.
Imran, sorry to cut you. Last
No.
year, there was a program which I watched, and I think they ran a series on it where they had a couple of children from England going to Africa. And so they go to the schools in Africa, and they get taught in Africa, and the children from here, obviously with the high schools and with all their tables and chairs and all the equipment, now they've gone to Africa, and it's very basic. The basic table, the basic chairs, just a textbook, the teacher writing on the blackboard. So, but when the children came back, they saw what these children had that these children in England didn't have. The children in England had all the resources, but they didn't have the etiquettes, they didn't have the manners, they didn't have the happiness, they didn't have, like, the grasp of the language that those children had. And they were from Africa, do you understand? And they were shocked, and they're thinking, wow, they were simple, they even lived with them, do you understand? And they thought, well, they were happier, they were there to learn. They wanted to go to school. But sometimes, like, even I want to, you have to like force them to get to school. But they were like, going to school was wow, it was a a
I think that's
unique
the
thing.
effects of the sort of education being free and in places, and what value you put on that. If you're having to save your week's wages to pay for a textbook for your kids, then you bet your kids are definitely going to be learning something.
Yeah.
They're gonna read that textbook.
Whatever value we put on that. It's good to have that perspective. I think kids should. We're lucky for lots of reasons, and free education is not everybody has that in the world. So
No, that's I always say to the child, we should be shukr to Allah that here in this country we've got free education, free medicine, free everything. And if we don't value these things, tomorrow Allah will ask us, you had it on the plate. What did you do?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's a scary bit. Then what answer do we have? At least somebody in a third world country or who didn't have the resources, they can say, Allah, well, we never had the resources, but we've got no excuses. And
There's no excuse.
so
Yeah.
Allah khair kare, Allah make it easy for us.
So Imran,
Something on Punjabi. Sorry,
I
you're
I
going
was
to tell
just,
us.
I think we're coming to the pretty much the same topic there, Molana. So I was going to say we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and I know Imran, you got some examples of some books that you want to just kind of give snippets out of. So I think
Love to.
that'd be a nice thing to move on to.
Okay.
I'm
Right. So
dying to listen to Punjabi. That's what it is.
no problem.
You
So
build this up, Imran. So yeah.
what I'll do is so very quickly, Molasab, right at the end, remind us about what we're doing on Wednesday. Okay, so we've got a number of books, and we've also got like there's a range of like John Menzies recently gave me loads of like these magazines, and there's there's a really big range of everything from science to sports cars. I showed you the Our Planet book. There's some more sort of magazines with these sorts of goodies. We've got things like your Roald Dahl books. Often they come with your different sort of audio CDs. So we'll tell you when you can come down and pick up some of those. Just before I sort of move on to the book around Punjabi, something that I was reading recently that I wanted to sort of show you guys. This was, as you can see, it says on the top, million copy worldwide bestseller. This is something I picked up recently because I have a boy of my own. I mentioned I have my son, and I was absolutely fascinated the way this guy talks about his experience of boys growing up and how that related to young men and adolescents, even in our communities. How he sort of like connects all these stories from how the Native Americans initiate their boys within the community. That's not just about the father or the mother, but there's a wider community that bring those people up and the lessons that they learn from that. So it's the book that I've got going on the go. Highly recommend for any parents wanting to watch. He's got a similar one that says Raising Girls, but I think he just use the success of this one to do that. And one that I know that if you're looking for a children's book, we've got some of these, but I know David Williams or Williams is seen as the sort of new Roald Dahl, and I sort of read some of his books with my kids, and I never really sort of like I thought he was trying too hard. This guy. So, Barbara, do you remember 96? You're a 96.
Yeah, the deal. Yeah, I do.
So 3 lines on a shirt.
That's it.
With
Yeah.
Skinner, they sang it. So he's a comedian, obviously, and he became a children's author, right? And we've absolutely, my boy, and more so than my boy, I fell in love with his books, right? And very quickly, before I move on to the Punjabi story, right, I'll just read you the beginning of this sort of. It starts off off-head report, Bracket Wood School report, summary of findings. This book is called Head Kid, and it's about a kid who swaps bodies with his head teacher and becomes in charge of the school, right? Anybody's fantasy that would be. So the detailed findings of the report are that the teaching is poor, facilities not good, food is inedible, staff morale is low, exam success, please don't ask, toilets are appalling, and ranking and recommendations see overleaf. And then on the first page, I'll just read you. It says, Bracket Wood School had never since it was opened all the way back in 1983 received an Ofsted ranking, or Ofhead as they call it in the book, of outstanding, nor had it received one of good. There was a very brief golden period in the early 80s when it received one of satisfactory, but that was found to have been a mistake. The inspector ticked the wrong box, which he himself got marked down to not as good as we thought, and it went back. And so you can see it sort of lays this out, and so David Baddiel, absolutely amazing writer. If you're looking for a good book for boys and girls from sort of 7, 8 up to 12 even, his books are amazing. Moving on to the story in Punjabi then. So I was speaking to Maulana Sahab earlier about just literacy in lots of different languages, and I stumbled across this particular story is quite personal to me, I should say, because it's the one that I remember my father telling us when we were children. And my memories of that time are sort of him, he's not with us anymore. That's like a really safe, the most happiest time in my life when I was sort of sat with him. So the benefits of actually, the mental benefits of sitting close to your children and having that connection, that physical connection, is really massive. And that's a time when you can sort of share stories and tell stories. So this story is called Ik Si Chidi Te Ik Sa Kaan. Mohan Sahab, how would you translate that? I'm just checking your Punjabi. Ik Si Chidi Te Ik Sa Kaan.
One bird and one crow.
Crow.
Crow, that's the one. So there was one bird and there was one crow. So that's the story, okay? So the story goes, and let's see if I can sort of, I've got it written down.
Don't test me anymore, yeah.
I want so here it is in its all its glory. So I'm going to read through this story. So this is an example of an early year story in Punjabi. So, and it starts off with the child that's in the book. So as a parent, you can you can put your own child's name in this. So in this one it's Nabila, which my dad used to tell my sister. So Nabila सहने से पहले अपने अब्बे की आया अब्बा जी मारे नाल कहानी पाओ. उसने अब्बे आया चंगा तू लेट ते मैं तू की चिड़ी तक काया वाली कहानी पाना. नबीला लेटी रही ते उसने अभी कहानी शुरू की थी. एक बहुत ऊंचा जिहा बूटा सा, उस बूटे ने मोटियां मोटियां डालियां ने बिशकार एक चिड़ी अपना आलना बनाया. वो आलना हाले पूरा नहीं सी होया, चिड़ी की कुछ और तीलियां नी लोड़ पेगी सी. उसकी तीलियां किरियों नहीं सी लभनियां पई. उस बूटे ने सबसू उच्चियां डालियां विच एक कायना आलना सा. वो आलना बहुत बड़ा ते शानदार सा. काए की इस गल्ले ना बड़ा घमंड सा कि उस नाल ना सारियां कोल ऊंचा आ. चिड़ी कोल तीलियां थुड़ी गईयां ते उस सोचा कि शायद काए कोल कुछ फालतू तीले होण. वो हिम्मत करी ते काए कोल गई ते उसकी आखनी भराऊ कुछ तीले थे नहीं ते चाहिदे. चिड़ी की डरे नाल पसीना आई गया. कां एवें बेला बैठिया सा पर इतना मगरूर होया सा कि वो पहले चिड़ी ना गले ने जवाब नहीं दिता. फिर रोले नाल उसकी डांटिया, यहां से दफा हो जाओ, मैं बहुत मसरूफ हूं. चिड़ी बेचारी निका जिहा मुंह किन्या वापस आएगी. वो अपने आलने कोलू एक डालिए पर बेई ते सोचनी सी कि तीले लोड़न मैं हूं कुथे जासां कि तकनियों आसमाना ने रंग बदली गया. वाह तेज चलन लगी. चिड़ी समझी गई कि नेरी अछने वाली है. इस वास्ते वो अपने आलने विच होईगी ते बाहर नेरी और तेज होईगी. काफी देर बाद नेरी खलती, आसमान साफ होया ते चिटका निकली आया. And I discovered from this book that chitka is the word for sun. चिड़ी धुप तकी ते बड़ी खुश होई. वो अपने आलने वास्ते तीले लोड़ने ती बाहर जाने नी तैयारी करन लगी सी. इस अपना आलने चों बाहर अपना सिर आलने चों बाहर कढिया ते उसने सिरै पर फूहां जियां ढैण लगी पईयां. चिड़ी बड़ी हैरान होई कि झड़ा बगैर बदल किस तरह. उस अपर तकिया. उस डाले ने ते कां बैठा सा. वो रोना सा पिया ते उसने अथरू फूहां उसने सिरै पर ढैने से पे. चिड़ी काए कोल गई ते उसने तकनी ते काए नाल ना उस कह तकना कि नेरी विच भजी त्रुटी गया ते उसना एक तीला होई गया. चिड़ी की तकी ते बड़ा अफसोस होया ते उस काए की दिलासा दिता अपने घर उसकी आंदास. चिड़ी ने हमदर्दी तकी ते कां अपनी पहलियां गल्लां पर बड़ा शर्मिंदा होया. वो जोरे जोरे नहीं रोन लगी पिया. वो चिड़ी की आखना कि मैं कितना भैड़ा सा ते तू कितनी चंगी है. चिड़ी आखिया कोई गल नहीं, हाँ चाह पी. उस दिन तो बाद चिड़ी ते काए नी दोस्ती होएगी. पहले चिड़ी नवा घर बनाने विच काए नी मदद कीती. उस वारी काए अपना आलना बूटे ने सब तो उच्चियां डालियां विच नहीं बनाया बल्कि चिड़ी ने आलने तो थोड़ा जिहा जेड़ा ना मोटियां डालियां ने बिशकार इतना ज्यादा ऊपर नहीं बनाया, साबी बनाया. काए ना नवा आलना बू बड़ा भी नहीं सी ते उस विचों काफी जे तीलियां बची गईयां ते इस तरह चिड़ी ना भी आलना बनी गया ते उसना भी कम हो गया. चिड़ी इस आलने विच 2 अंडे दिते. कुछ अरसे बाद इन अंडियां चों 2 बच्चे निकले. चिड़ी बहुत खुश हुई. काए चिड़ी ने बच्चे तके ते वो भी बड़ा खुश होया. चिड़ी ने बच्चे थोड़े जे बड़े होए ते वो काए की मामू आहन लगे पे ते चिड़ी उन्हां वास्ते दाने शाने कट्टन जानी सी ते कां उन्हां कोल रहना सी ते उन्हां नाल चंगियां चंगियां कहानियां बाना सा. एक दिहाड़े चिड़ी बाहर गई होई ते उसने बच्चे अपने आलने विच सुत्ते से. कां अपने आलने विच सुत्ता सा. इचर उथों एक बिल्ली लंघी. उस चिड़ी ने आलने दर बड़ियां भुखियां अखियां नाल तकिया ते फिर बल्ले बल्ले बूटे उपर चढ़ना शुरू होएगी. चिड़ी दा आलना बिल्ली ने पंजियां कोलों बस थोड़ा जिहा दूर रिहा सा ते थोड़ी जी होर देर होनी ते ਉਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਕੀ ਖਾਈ ਜਾ ਯਾਰ ਪਰ ਅੱਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਖ ਖੁੱਲੀ ਗਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਿੱਲੀ ਕੀ ਤੱਕਿਆ ਤੇ ਰੋਲਾ ਬਾਈ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰੋਲਾ ਸੁਣੀ ਕਿ ਕਾਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਆਈ ਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਉਡਰੀ ਕੇ ਬਿੱਲੀ ਕੀ ਪਈ ਗਿਆ ਇੱਕ ਚੁੰਝ ਬਿੱਲੀ ਨੇ ਸਿਰੇ पर मारी ते एक नके पर काइनियां चुंझां इतनियां डाढ़ियां सन कि बिल्ली की होश न रही ते वो छाल मारी के थल्ले टली गई चिड़ी वापस आई ते बच्चियां उसकी सारी गल दसी उस काए ना शुक्रिया अदा कीता काए आखया कोई गल नहीं ये ते माड़ा फर्ज सा फिर चिड़ी ने बच्चे सारी दिहाड़ी बिल्ली ते काए दियां गल्लां करने रहे ते राती सैने से पहले चिड़ी की आखन लगे पे अम्मी असां नाल कहानी बाओ चिड़ी आखया तुसां लेटो ते मैं तुसां नाल बहुत चंगी कहानी बानी है बच्चे लेटी रहे चिड़ी कहानी शुरू की एक सी कुड़ी उसका नाम सा नबीला पर ये एक और कहानी है and that's the end
MashaAllah,
of
very nice.
that. Maulana Sahab, I think you enjoyed that.
That is really nice, MashaAllah. I think Baba, we should have a podcast every night, lullaby or what the storytelling in Punjabi every night for
And
the
invite brother Imran to come and tell us a story.
people for the people of Girlington before they go to sleep.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah. That's all.
So much, very nice.
I think this the you can sort of relate to what you relate to stories in that, and before I sort of really paid attention to that story, it's in any story. I think the Chidi and the Kaa is like a folk tale that exists. A lot of people will be able to like have a variation of that story, or there'll be other stories that they know. And I just want to be able to give people the confidence to say, okay, it doesn't matter. You can do that in your own language. It's absolutely fine.
100%. 100%. You alluded to earlier about some drive to hand out books that's happening on Wednesday. Maulana Sahab, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let me just pull up. Yeah, inshallah, this Wednesday, 3 o'clock till 4 o'clock. So Wednesday, 8th of July. So this coming Wednesday, inshallah, outside the masjid, Brother Imran, inshallah, and his volunteers, they'll be outside the masjid and they'll be distributing free books, okay, from the National Literacy Trust. So the whole purpose is to get the children to take the books, the parents to take the books, and so that they go home and they make an environment of reading. So the whole purpose is that they read and they'll all be distributed free. So you take it, inshallah, Brother Imran will be there outside the masjid, 3 o'clock till 4. The reason we put this timing is so I think the schools are on as well. So when the parents come past the masjid, so in front of the masjid, Brother Imran will be there. We'll probably have a table out, inshallah, and we'll have all the books laid out, and parents, children can come, take the books and go home and read them and enjoy them. And I think Imran can elaborate more on the purpose of
100% myself. So one of the things that we've had to do inevitably, as lots of people have, in terms of connecting to people during this period, where schools are sort of going digital, lots of families and kids are at home, and often there are no books. So one of our big motivations is to try and get books into people's homes. This is part of that. We do it through a number of channels. So I mentioned our literacy champions before. Anybody listening to this feels like that's something that you could get involved in, i.e. be the person that then connects to other people or gives books out to other people, please get in touch. We are still working with and promoting literacy champions through which we're giving books out to. So this is part of that. It's been donated through a number of publishers, as I mentioned right at the beginning, and we want to get as many books out to families and children. I will sort of also plug at this time is that we've had to think very carefully about how we reach families during this time. Usually we're used to sort of seeing families and parents in schools, going to their homes and other mediums. We can't do that now. So we've moved from that. So there's a number of things I would urge sort of people. We've adapted the digital platforms like lots of people have. In the past, we didn't used to have local Facebook pages, but there's a lot of content, tips, advice. What I just did earlier there, professional authors from around the country that we sort of invite in and they read stories to us. Lots of competitions. There's like almost like a fortnightly Roald Dahl competition where kids can win bundles of books to take home, and they're really interesting competitions to get involved in, things to do at home. So here's our sort of Facebook page, which is Bradford Stories. please log into Facebook, check out our Facebook page at Bradford Stories, give us a like, and if you follow us, you'll see the sort of all the things that come up. You'll get regular updates. And the other thing that we've moved to is Family Zone. If you Google that, so Literacy Trust Family Zone, and that is our sort of national platform where we have some amazing authors and lots of advice and all the latest and the way that we're sort of connecting. So Bradford Stories, Family Zone, do check out those two. If you're interested in becoming a literacy champion and sort of supporting children and in terms of gifting books out. So, you know, one example is Tassif, who you'll know, who is another local lad. He's sort of used his connections to get books out to some of the schools for us. Send me an email. My email address is imran.hafeez. That's HAFEEZ at literacytrust.org.uk. And let's have a chat. You know, let's see how we can do that. And so what I'll do is I'll reiterate sort of, and I'll pass on some flyers to anybody that comes to pick books. I'll bring some of the magazines. There's magazines for grown-ups, some of the ones that I mentioned that my mensees have given us. So if you're coming along with your children on Wednesday to pick up some books, I'll make sure that we have a good collection of, and the sort of current magazines that are out there, everything from sort of home and decor to arts and crafts, photography, whatever your interest is. If you're interested in any of those, come down please and take them. I'll try and bring enough depending on how many people come. I think what we did at the the book gifting thing was we limited it to 2 books per child. And I think we'll try and do the same this time around. So maybe a magazine and a book, something like that. We'll give out. As I say, we've got a range. I showed you some of them earlier. We've got some Roald Dahl books. We've got sort of books for different genres. So I'll try and bring a mix of the books that we've got. Take them, share them with your siblings. Enjoy them at home, and connect and get involved in the online platforms that I mentioned. I think you'll really enjoy some of the stuff that we've got going on.
Amazing. And that's Wednesday, 8th July between 3 and 4, inshallah, outside the masjid.
Outside the masjid, yeah.
Brilliant. So just to finish up, first of all, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Imran. It's been really intriguing, some really interesting points, and mashallah, it was amazing to hear you on that story, narrating that to us. That was amazing. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Robert. Thank you.
Mashallah. Masjid, as masjid are closed down, the revenue in the masjid has massively dropped. So we really need your donations to help us fund the masjid, keep going. Masjid has running bills, has cost bills, which are still there. So we need that. Also, the new builds, we're in the place where we need money to get the new build open. We want to get them bottom 2 floors started, so we can move people into it. The environment that the girls were learning in is really run down and needs refreshing. So we really want to get the girls' classes into the new masjid. So anything you can do, if you go to masjidumar.com, masjidumar.net, I should really know that because I've managed that website. Click on the fund section. There's a whole host of ways you can do it by standing order. You can write checks. There's telephone numbers for people on there if you want to contact them. There's also the GoFundMe link. So go click on that link if you want to do it over the internet and you don't want to, in this environment, you don't want to meet people. All of them are across the bottom. So at any point, if you want to come back to this video, click pause, take down some of them details, you'll be able to get money to us. Inshallah, may Allah reward you for that. On Facebook and YouTube, if you just hit a like and subscribe. Therefore, anytime we go out, Sundays at 7 o'clock when we go live. But when we go live, you'll get notifications to tell you. Also, Maulana Sahib putting out constant content, Allah's names and daily reminders and namaz times and timetables, and Maulana Sahib all over that stuff. So if you want the latest about COVID and how the masjid is doing it, what our procedures are for opening up, we just recently released a small video about our procedures. So just before you come to the masjid, head over to our YouTube channel, have a look at that, so you'll understand about, you know, when the executive member tells you to go over there or do this, do that, you'll have a better understanding before you actually get there and have to do it for the first time. And lastly, I just want to mention next week's podcast, Sunday 7 o'clock. We're going to have someone from the Ummah Welfare Trust, and we're going to start talking about the situation in the world around how the Ummah is doing, and we're going to really start talking about the situation in Yemen, inshallah, and get more information of what it's like on the ground from people who are there. Maulana Sahib, did I miss something?
No, mashallah, I think you covered everything. Jazakallah Imran for coming, take out your time. And like we said, we appeal to all the parents, please come in on Wednesday, inshallah, take the books. Main thing is take out time with your children, especially during these lockdown times. Sit down, talk, communicate, read books. And this is your opportunity to learn as well, and create an environment of good inside the house. And may Allah gives all the tawfiq to do so. And mashallah, just had some comments. I'm just reading. Much of people are following what we're doing. Where the whole purpose of all these podcasts, I know Baba says it's not me. It's with the tawfiq of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Baba, mashallah, puts a lot of effort behind this as well. Lots of people are involved. May Allah Taala reward them all, bless them all. May Allah Taala get through these difficult times and these and bring back the good times again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon the ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us successful in the dunya and in the akhirat. Ameen. Jazakallah.
Barakallah fi- yeah, I mean,
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.